While a group of teenagers wanted in connection with an attack on NYPD officers in Times Square.
Police say the teenagers are part of a gang.
It's May 2nd, 2025. A notorious street gang known as Los Diablos de la 42 attacked two NYPD officers when they tried to stop an attempted robbery at Times Square, New York City. Turns out the law soon caught up with them because they made a huge mistake. We got some times where gangs are messing with the wrong cops.
The cult-like discipline of the Latin Kings was enforced through
extreme violence.
We go to June 27th, 1995. Officer Paul Pagan responds to a call about a domestic dispute at Amsterdam Avenue in Manhattan. Now, this is going to take a violent turn because a street gang in the area, known as the Latin Kings, attempted to kill the officer. The Latin Kings is one of the largest and most violent Hispanic street gangs in the U.S., operating across several states and within the prison system. Originally formed in Chicago jails during the 1950s, the gang has expanded now to New York, Florida, Massachusetts, Illinois, and Connecticut. Known officially as the Almighty Latin King and Queen Nation, their members are heavily involved in crimes like drug trafficking, homicide, robbery, identity theft, and gang-related assaults. In the 1990s, they had a dominant presence in New York, specifically in the housing projects, where they often initiated young members through dangerous and violent tasks. On June 27, 95, 4 members of the Latin Kings planned a calculated attack targeting law enforcement. This would occur at the Amsterdam houses at 50 Amsterdam Avenue in Manhattan at around 2 a.m. Members of the gang placed a fake 911 call reporting a violent domestic dispute at the building. This tactic would often lure officers into traps, and it was part of the gang's strategy to test out loyalty and eliminate what they viewed as threats to their territory. So that night, Officer Paul Pagan of the Manhattan Housing Police responds to the call along with his partner. Unknown to Pagan here, the call had been placed by the Latin Kings under the direction of Francisco Torres, known within the gang as King Bolo. He held the title of Supreme Crown of the Lion Tribe, one of the highest ranks in the organization. Now, alongside him were Felix Soto, known as King Gordo, Jose Nieves, known as King Sleepy, and a recruit named Fernando Reyes, who went by the name Jay. The gang would order Reyes and Nieves to climb to the roof of the 13-story building with a 60-pound steel mesh garbage can. The intent was to kill a police officer as part of Reyes' initiation into the gang. So Officer Pagan arrives, starts checking his squad car for a flashlight, and the gang members move into position. Reyes, struggling with that heavy trash can, received assistance from Nieves. Together, they would push that trash can over the edge, aiming directly at the police cruiser below. By sheer luck, Pagan had leaned into the car at the precise moment that trash can dropped, causing it to strike on the top of the open car door instead of his head. The impact shattered the window and collapsed the door, sending glass flying and cutting the officer. Though not seriously. Had Pagan remained upright, the blow would have likely been fatal. Immediately after that trash can hit the vehicle, Officer Pagan spotted Torres and Soto standing near the scene. The police were able to track and arrest Felix Soto shortly afterward. Now, during questioning, Soto identified the 3 other participants involved in the attack. Prosecutors would later confirm that Reyes and Nieves had been the ones on the rooftop. Reyes denies throwing the can. Nieves says that he had no intention of hurting anyone, but the retaliation from law enforcement was quick. The Manhattan DA, Robert Morgenthau, announced that Reyes, Torres, Soto, and Nieves had been indicted for attempted murder. And because Reyes was not of legal age, he was charged with second-degree attempted murder, carrying a potential sentence of up to 25 years in prison. Torres, Soto, and Nieves, all adults, are charged with first-degree attempted murder, carrying a max sentence of 25 to life. Now, further investigation showed that this wasn't the first time Torres and Nieves had been tied to violent crimes. You see, Torres had already been indicted federally in a separate case involving 29 gang members charged with multiple murders, drug trafficking, and related crimes. Nieves was also facing charges for a murder committed in May 1995, involving the killing of a drug customer who had caused trouble for another gang called the Natural Born Killers. The Latin Kings had been contracted to provide security for that operation. So the attempt on Officer Pagan's life drew attention, not only because of how brutal it was, but also due to its odd resemblance to a previous tragedy. On October 8, 1993, Officer John Williamson, a colleague of Pagan's, was killed in almost identical circumstances. That poor guy was struck to the head by a 30-pound bucket of spackle thrown from a rooftop at Washington Heights. The suspect in that case was later convicted and sentenced to 5 to 15 years for manslaughter. Now, although the Latin Kings had attempted to eliminate an officer as part of their internal hierarchy and initiation process, Officer Pagan had survived the attempt on his life and returned right back to duty. The arrests and charges that followed also sent a clear message that violence against law enforcement wouldn't go unanswered.
And anyone who tries to fill the void left by today's arrests should know we're not going to tolerate those who terrorize our neighborhoods and put innocent people at risk.
Aside from that, the indictment of the 4 gang members brought their operations under greater scrutiny and had disrupted some of their activity in the area.
While a group of teenagers wanted in connection with an attack on NYPD officers in Times Square.
Police say the teenagers are part of a gang.
When the officers were swarmed and attacked by members of the notorious Tren de Aragua gang, including a young offshoot called the Diablos de la 42, or Devils of 42nd Street.
More recently, in early May 2025, a violent Venezuelan gang known as Los Diablos de la 42 made headlines after launching a bold and coordinated attack on police officers in one of the busiest and most highly surveyed areas of the U.S., Times Square, New York City. Now, this gang is made up largely of teenage migrants, no more than 19 years old, and they'd been linked to a wave of robberies throughout the city, particularly in Central Park and on the subway system. But it was their bold assault on NYPD officers that drew national attention and ultimately triggered a sharp response from law enforcement. May 2nd, 2025, at approximately 7:30 p.m., 2 NYPD cops are patrolling near West 42nd Street and 8th Avenue, just a block away from a major boxing event that had brought thousands into the area. Now, the officers noticed a group of around 10 to 12 individuals surrounding 3 others in what appeared to be an attempted robbery. As the officers tried to intervene, the situation quickly escalated. The Los Diablos de la 42 turned on these officers in what officials described as a planned ambush. Armed with makeshift weapons, the teens pelted the officers in a violent and chaotic attack that was captured on video by bystanders and surveillance cameras. So following the attack, NYPD launches an investigation, and within hours, detectives identify the gang members responsible by using the department's gang database. Commissioner Jessica Tisch confirmed that several suspects were already listed in that database, proven critical in expediting the identification process. So by May 6th, 2025, police had arrested 5 individuals involved in the assault. 3 of them were arrested the next day after the attack. A 4th turned himself in. Investigators would also discover that the attackers had prior arrests and were repeat offenders. Some had also been released back onto the street despite their violent records due to their ages. Now, among those arrested, charges included attempted felony assault, inciting a riot, reckless endangerment, and criminal possession of a weapon. One guy got attempted assault on a police officer in riot, while another would face charges including second-degree riot and third-degree menacing. Now, the police response didn't stop at arrests. Officers tracked down the remaining suspects using body cam footage and surveillance video. Although 3 suspects remained at large as part of the latest reports, authorities stated that more arrests were imminent. The Deputy Mayor of Public Safety, Kaz Dotry, emphasized that the officers involved had initially believed they were stopping a simple fight, but then quickly realized they were preventing a robbery. The attack, according to law enforcement, was premeditated and executed with clear intent to harm the officers. Further investigations would show that Los Diablos de la 42 wasn't just a random group of unruly teenagers, but a structured subset of Tren de Aragua, which had been linked to organized criminal activity in several countries. Now, this gang is known for its violent attacks, and its members in New York have been connected to more than 240 arrests across 37 individuals. But despite those numbers, many of the suspects were released repeatedly due to their age and lenient city policies on juvie offenders. So following the assault, the city and federal law enforcement agencies pledged to take stronger actions. Tricia McLaughlin from the Department of Homeland Security confirmed that all remaining suspects would be found and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Salvadoran authorities also cooperated by imprisoning several Tren de Aragua members who were deported from the U.S., showing international support in dealing with this gang.
All of a sudden, man, it's like being on a military firing range where somebody says, "Commence fire," and it's just pow, 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 pow from every direction.
1989, one of the most violent street gangs in America made a fatal mistake when they targeted the wrong man. Staff Sergeant William Bill Folk, a seasoned Army Ranger who just wanted a better life in Tacoma, Washington. Now, the gang in question was the Crips, a powerful, expanding criminal organization that had spread from California into Washington state during the peak of the crack cocaine epidemic. Now, their goal was to claim new drug markets, and Tacoma's Hilltop neighborhood became a primary battleground. The Crips had established control over a house on South Ash Street, directly across from where Folk purchased a condemned property in 1987 for $10,000. The home had no doors, windows, wiring, nor plumbing. But Folk, with over 10 years of military experience, saw it as a long-term investment. He believed that the drug-infested neighborhood could be turned around. And over time, Folk would invest into rebuilding the home and try to establish a stable community. But his hope was tested almost immediately. By 1989, the area had become one of the most dangerous in the state, plagued by open-air drug dealing and regular shootings. Frustrated by the lack of police action, Folk took matters into his own hands. He installed a video camera in his window. He would document drug transactions, weapons, and the growing number of gang members frequenting the property. He and his neighbors would keep records, take photos, and write down license plates.
Taking pictures of hand-to-hand, taking pictures of the drug dealers. But then he started taking pictures of all the gang members that were moving in and all the guns.
September 21st, 1989. Their efforts eventually brought some attention, especially after a local newspaper, the News Tribune, published an article describing the tension on Ash Street and hinting at the possibility of vigilantism. However, the media exposure embarrassed the gang, who viewed this now as a direct threat to their authority, and tensions would escalate quickly. 2 days after the article was published, on September 23rd, Folk hosted a barbecue at his home to promote unity in the neighborhood and bring attention to the rising crime rate. In attendance, we have neighbors, families, and a few of his fellow Rangers from Fort Lewis. And as this event progressed, gang members from across the street began throwing bottles, fruit, and even rocks at Folk's home, aiming for the surveillance camera. The aggression intensified when one gang member fired a BB gun at the house. So Folk and some of his Rangers walk across the street and tell the guys to stop it. Instead of backing down, though, the gang threatened to burn his house down and kill him. So by 6:30 p.m., a warning shot was fired into the air from a passing car as clear evidence that a full-blown attack was imminent. Realizing the situation is now spiraling out of control, Folk made an urgent call to his base.
I'm about to come under attack at my house, and I need every available Ranger now.
Within minutes, approximately 15 Rangers get to the house, each bringing their own personal firearm. Now, as trained combat soldiers, they take immediate defense positions around the property and wait. At 9:20 p.m., the shooting began. Witnesses said it sounded like a military firing range, with bullets flying in every direction. The Crips, using their cars and nearby buildings for cover, would fire at Folk's house. The Rangers returned fire from the inside and around the property. An estimated 300 rounds were exchanged during that shootout, which lasted around 10 to 30 minutes. The volume and intensity of that gunfire stunned the community. And for the first few minutes, local police were pinned down and unable to intervene. Eventually, police regrouped and moved in with greater numbers. The gang members scattered into the night. 2 suspects were arrested, but only one was charged with second-degree assault. Surprisingly, no official injuries were reported that night, but Folk later confirmed that several gang members had been shot. And according to him, their fellow gang members likely carried him away before emergency responders arrived. He said it was clear some were hit, but none waited around for medical assistance. The police would confiscate the Rangers' weapons as part of the investigation, but they were later returned after authorities determined they'd acted in self-defense. The military backed that conclusion as well. Although the Army supported Folk's right to protect himself, his decision to involve fellow soldiers in a civilian matter led to consequences. He was denied a promotion, and other Rangers were instructed to avoid visiting his home. But despite that, Folk continued to serve, and even took part in the U.S. invasion of Panama later that year. Aside from that, the aftermath of the Hilltop shootout forced the city of Tacoma to confront its escalating gang crisis. The violent standoff brought national attention and became a catalyst for change. Police practices were reevaluated. The city would also shift to community-based policing, increased patrols, and supported neighborhood watch efforts. In the end, crime in Hilltop eventually declined, And by the early 2000s, the area had undergone a visible transformation. Folks stayed in his home through it all. And as of 2022, the guy still resides on Ash Street. And get this, the property he bought for $10,000 is now valued at over $400,000. This guy intentionally left one bullet hole unrepaired as a physical reminder of the night he and his fellow Rangers defended his house from a very violent gang attack.
The suspect wanted for a shooting and an LA County Sheriff's motorcycle deputy in the back is in custody.
Welcome to April 22nd, 2024, West Covina, California. An unnamed gang sent one of their members named Raimundo Duran on an assignment that would ultimately cost him his freedom. Duran, a 47-year-old man with a long history of violent crimes and known ties to a criminal gang, launched an unprovoked attack against law enforcement by ambushing an LA County Sheriff's deputy who was stopped at a red light. Raimundo's criminal record spans more than 2 decades, including serious offenses like voluntary manslaughter, multiple assaults in prison, evading police, and illegal possession of firearms. In 2001, he's charged with murder, but later pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter, receiving an 11-year prison sentence. Now, while in prison, he continued his violent behavior, which included attacks on guards, and even a fellow inmate. After his release, he didn't stop being a criminal. In 2021, he led police on a high-speed chase after a hit-and-run incident. And in 2022, he's arrested yet again for firearms and ammunition possession while on probation. Now, despite all these offenses, Duran remained free due to plea deals and concurrent sentencing. On April 22nd, he crossed a line that put him in the direct path of law enforcement retaliation. You see, that day, Deputy Samuel Aispuro, a nearly 20-year veteran of the LA County Sheriff's Department, was on duty, riding his department motorcycle in full uniform. He's at the intersection of Barranca Street and East Garvey Avenue in West Covina, just waiting at a red light. Duran drives up beside him in a 2008 silver Toyota Camry and just opens fire, shooting the deputy in the back. The bullet struck Aispuro's bulletproof vest. Had it landed just an inch higher, it could have missed that vest and likely killed him. Despite the shock and pain of being shot, Aispuro was able to radio in for assistance, which triggered a swift and massive law enforcement response. A perimeter is quickly established in the area as police would begin to search for their suspect. Now, several hours later, at around 10 p.m., Duran was stopped by California Highway Patrol officers at the San Onofre inspection point in San Diego County. Initially detained on suspicion of driving under the influence and unlawful possession of a firearm, Duran was soon linked to the earlier ambush in West Covina. Security cam footage, witness statements, and even a firearm recovered from his vehicle all pointed to him as the shooter. The weapon found in his car was also sent to forensic testing, further solidifying the case against him. Law enforcement wasted no time. On April 24th, DA George Gascon announced that Duran had been formally charged with attempted first-degree murder of a peace officer, assault on a peace officer, being a felon in possession of a firearm, and a special allegation of intentionally using a firearm during the commission of a crime. These charges carry the potential for life in prison if he's convicted. Deputy Aispuro was treated at a local hospital, released the same day. His bulletproof vest had saved his life. A husband and a father of 2 children, Aispuro was later reported to be recovering at home. Sheriff Robert Luna would praise the witnesses who rushed to help the wounded deputy and called them heroes. Their immediate aid and later testimony were key in building the case against Duran. Meanwhile, Duran remains behind bars at San Diego County Jail with a bail set over $1 million. He, however, pled not guilty to the charges and is awaiting a court hearing to determine if there's enough evidence for a trial. Nevertheless, his long history of violent offenses, including prior convictions for voluntary manslaughter, assaults in custody, and multiple parole violations, makes him more of a career criminal who repeatedly evaded long-term imprisonment due to lenient sentencing and plea agreements. Now, authorities haven't revealed the name of the gang Duran's affiliated with, but they confirm he's a documented gang member and that they intend on going after this gang itself. They also noted that, given Duran's criminal record, he should never have had access to a firearm. Sheriff Luna further stated that the incident simply shows the dangers officers face daily and the importance of keeping violent offenders off the streets.
John Dillinger escaped from jail. Members of his gang stormed a jail in Ohio and gunned down the sheriff. and freeing Dillinger.
We go all the way back to the 1930s. The U.S. was deep in the grip of the Great Depression, a time of immense hardship and desperation, but it saw a wave of crime that would grip the public's imagination. Among the gangs that emerged during this era, none caused more chaos and destruction than the one led by John Herbert Dillinger. Now, Dillinger and his gang committed a string of bold bank robberies, prison breaks, and shootouts with law enforcement across the Midwest. But in one case, they kinda went too far. When Dillinger and his crew turned their guns on lawmen, they triggered a response from a determined group of officers and feds that would ultimately lead to their downfall. John Dillinger's gang consisted of several notorious criminals, including Harry Pierpont, Russell Clark, Charles Mackley, Harry Copeland, and John Red Hamilton. Between 1933 and 34, this group committed violent crimes that included the deaths of 10 men, injuries to several others, and numerous robberies. Their boldness made headlines, but their carelessness would eventually catch up with them. So on October 12, 1933, the Dillinger gang made a fatal error when they targeted the Lima, Ohio jail, where Dillinger had been held after his arrest for robbing a bank in Bluffton, Ohio. After searching him, before putting him into the prison, the police discovered a document which appeared to be a prison escape plan. Although the sheriff asked Dillinger to explain what the document meant, he refused. However, it was a plan that was used by 3 members of his gang, Mackley, Pierpont, and Clark, where they would come to the jail and pose as Indiana state officials. They claimed they'd come to extradite Dillinger to Indiana, so the sheriff, skeptical, asked to see their IDs. One of the men pulls out a gun and just shoots him, leaving him critically wounded. The gang steals the jail keys, locked the sheriff's wife and deputy in a cell, freed Dillinger, and fled the scene, leaving the sheriff to die on the jail floor. The act of violence shocked the public and escalated the urgency of this manhunt. So following the breakout, Dillinger and his gang embark on a spree of crimes that included robbing banks and police arsenals in Indiana. They stole guns, ammunition, and bulletproof vests. And on January 15, 1934, during a robbery at the First National Bank in East Chicago, Dillinger shot and killed a police officer, which marked the beginning of federal interest in his capture. Later that month, Dillinger and the gang traveled to Tucson, Arizona, hoping to avoid attention. However, a fire breaks out in their hotel. Firefighters recognized them right away from the wanted posters, and local police moved in. On January 25th, Dillinger, Pierpont, Clark, and Mackley are arrested. Police recover over $25,000 in cash, several submachine guns, rifles, and even bulletproof vests. Dillinger is then sent to Crown Point, Indiana, to await trial for the murder of the East Chicago officer. Now, due to his reputation for prison escapes, local officials would brag that the Crown Point was escape-proof. But on March 3rd, 1934, Dillinger pulls off yet another escape that just stuns the nation. He used what he later claimed was a wooden gun he carved himself to intimidate the guards. He forces them to unlock his cell, takes 2 machine guns, and locks up several officers, including the sheriff's staff. And then in a bold move, he steals the sheriff's car and drives it across the Indiana-Illinois state line. And by crossing state lines in a stolen vehicle, Dillinger violated the National Motor Vehicle Theft Act, and that allowed the FBI to take over the pursuit. The federal government responded swiftly. The FBI issued a complaint, and federal agents began actively tracking Dillinger. Meanwhile, Pierpont, Mackley, and Clark were returned to Ohio and convicted of murdering the Lima sheriff. Pierpont and Mackley were sentenced to death, and Clark to life in prison. During a failed escape attempt, Mackley was killed, and Pierpont, seriously wounded, was later executed. After the Crown Point escape, Dillinger returned to criminal activity. He robbed more banks and even looted a police station in Warsaw, Indiana, stealing more weapons and vests. By now, his gang included some of the most dangerous outlaws in the country, such as Babyface Nelson, Homer Van Meter, and Eddie Green. March 31st, 1934, the feds would close in on Dillinger and his gang at the Lincoln Court Apartments in St. Paul, Minnesota. A shootout followed, and Dillinger managed to escape despite being wounded, but Eddie Green was later killed in another confrontation with agents. Dillinger fled to his hometown of Mooresville, Indiana, to recover from his wounds. However, his girlfriend, Evelyn Freshett, was arrested shortly after while trying to return to Chicago. She's convicted and sentenced to 2 years for harboring a fugitive. That same year, Dillinger tried escape and capture through drastic measures. Hiding in Chicago, he would pay $5,000 to Dr. Willem Lozer, a narcotics-involved surgeon, to alter his face and fingerprints. Loser used hydrochloric acid and a scalpel to destroy Dillinger's ridges, leaving him unable to use his hands for days. The centers of his fingerprints were now damaged, but the edges remained identifiable. Dillinger also tried wearing glasses, dyed his hair, and grew a mustache to mask his identity. His disguise was said to be so convincing that even the closest to him couldn't recognize him.
Dillinger eventually died in a shootout with FBI agents outside a movie theater in Chicago.
As elusive as John Dillinger seemed, the end came in July 1934. A brothel madam from Gary, Indiana, named Anna Campanas, also known as Anna Sage, contacted authorities. Facing deportation due to her immigration status, she offered to help the FBI in exchange for assistance in halting her deportation. She revealed that Dillinger had been visiting her establishment with a friend named Polly Hamilton, and she tells the agents that they would likely attend a movie on the evening of July 22nd. So that night, Dillinger, Sage, and Hamilton went to the Biograph Theater in Chicago. Agents from the FBI, led by Melvin Purvis and Samuel L. Cowley, waited outside, and as Dillinger exited the theater around 10:30 p.m., he sensed the trap and tried to run. Drawing a pistol, 3 agents opened fire. Dillinger's hit multiple times, collapses in the alley, and at 10:50 p.m., he's pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. In the months that followed, the FBI arrested 27 people who had aided Dillinger or harbored him. Babyface Nelson, another key member of the gang, was also killed in a shootout on November 27th, 1934, but not before fatally wounding 2 FBI agents, including Cowley. The remaining gang members were either killed or arrested.